It would shock you to find out some things you never knew about Queen Victoria. Surprisingly, she took pleasure in the joys of the flesh and nakedness. From her lonely childhood through the many years she spent grieving for her deceased spouse Albert, her life was likewise characterized by a tremendous deal of loneliness. She was the second longest reigning English monarch, having held office from 1837 to 1901. But despite her darker moments, she was able to guide the British monarchy during a period of immense peace and prosperity. Hi, welcome back to History Rediscovered. In this episode, we discuss jaw-dropping hidden facts you never knew about Queen Victoria. She enjoyed being naked. Victoria truly enjoyed having sex and greatly admired the human body when it was unadorned. Because of the liberal inclinations of the 19th century king, Britain has a fascination with naked bodies. Despite sometimes being portrayed as prim, Queen Victoria was reputedly extremely at ease with the human form. Victoria's choices were actually a touch more seductive than her husband's, according to an exhibition of the artworks the royal couple gave to one another. While Albert's preferences were more subdued, Victoria ordered and gifted him a number of works that showed bare body, including Franz Xaver Winterhalter's Florinda, Una among the Fauns and Wood Nymphs, and The Disarming of Cupid by William Edward Frost. Also, she paid for the creation of a private image of herself that is now referred to as the secret picture, and was intended for the prince alone. Although Victoria's leisurely posture, her distant, unfocused glance, and her free-flowing hair might not seem particularly seductive to us now, they would have been at the time. She proposed to her husband.
Albert, will you marry me?
Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha was introduced to Princess Victoria before her 17th birthday celebration. On October 15, 1839, Victoria, who was now the monarch, popped the question to Prince Albert. They were married on February 10, 1840, in the Chapel Royal of St. James's Palace in London, 4 years later. While it would be fantastic if Victoria had a highly progressive streak, the truth is that she had to propose to Albert because she was the sovereign, not because she wanted to as a female. "I sent for Albert," she wrote in her journal, describing the event with warmth. "He came to the closet where I was alone, and after a few minutes I said to him that I thought he must be aware why I wished them to come here, and that it would make me too happy if he would consent to what I wished, to marry me. We embraced each other over and over again, and he was so kind, so affectionate. I really felt it was the happiest, brightest moment in my life." Victoria was deeply in love with Albert and, once they were married, she claimed to be truly happy for the first time in her life. She introduced hemophilia to several European royal bloodlines. Hemophilia has been referred to as the royal disease because Queen Victoria passed it on to several European reigning dynasties. Although Queen Victoria was the first member of her family to have carried hemophilia B, a blood clotting ailment, the Queen did not have the condition. It is an uncommon hereditary condition that interferes with blood's capacity to clot. Leopold, one of Victoria's sons, and two of her daughters both carried the hemophilia gene. The gene was passed on to Spain's male successor by her daughter Beatrice, who wed into the royal line of Spain. The male successor to the Russian throne contracted the illness from one of Victoria's other daughters, Alice, who produced a daughter who was a carrier of the illness. Two of Queen Victoria's grandsons, Friedrich and Leopold, also bled to death as a result of the condition, as did Leopold, the Duke of Albany, the daughter of Queen Victoria, who passed away at age 30 after tripping and falling. She started the trend of wearing white wedding dresses. It was customary for wedding gowns to appear in a range of hues during those times, but at the time of her wedding Queen Victoria wanted to highlight the lace embroidery on her dress and asked for it to be white. Although Queen Philippa was the first queen to attend her wedding in a white dress, Victoria was the one to popularize the look. When Victoria got married, red was a popular hue in the era's bridal attire. Contrary to popular belief, women historically opted to wear white on their wedding day not as a representation of a woman's purity but rather as a statement of prosperity. White clothing was difficult to keep clean and highly valuable beautiful white fabric throughout Victoria's day. Because it was simpler to conceal stains, many ladies chose colored wedding gowns. Did Victoria dress in white in order to display the extent of her wealth to the world? Some academics seem to agree, while others contend that the Queen's white attire was a show of solidarity with the lower-class lace workers. Many textile workers found themselves out of job as factory-produced lace quickly displaced handmade lace in the market. Victoria was able to make a statement and more prominently display the elaborate lace on her dress by selecting a white dress. She was the target of at least 7 assassination attempts. Queen Victoria was attacked by lunatics at least 7 times throughout her reign, some of whom may have had unhealthy fascinations with the monarch. At least 4 of these attempts, many of which took place while the Queen was riding in her carriage, involved the use of a firearm. Victoria received many gunshot wounds, yet with one exception, she emerged from each attack unharmed. Victoria was hit in the head with a cane by a well-dressed man who approached the royal carriage on the evening of June 27, 1850, while she and 3 of her children were returning to Buckingham Palace. Evidently, the impact was so powerful that it broke the Queen's bonnet and caused some blood to bleed. None of the individuals who tried to kill the Queen received a death sentence. When the majority of them were determined to be mentally ill, they were either sent to prison colonies or kept in detention for the length of Queen Victoria's reign. Queen Victoria once remarked, in reference to all of the attempts on her life, "It is worth being shot at to see how much one is loved." For 40 years, she lamented the loss of her husband. Albert, Queen Victoria's husband, passed away at the age of 42 after a 2-year illness. Queen Victoria outlived him. At the time, he was deemed to have a severe case of typhoid fever, but today's medical professionals speculate that he may have had Crohn's disease. Victoria suffered a great deal after Albert passed away. Her depression became so severe that she refused to appear in public for almost 3 years. In the Victorian era, a year was considered proper or expected as a time of mourning. However, Victoria mourned the passing of her husband for the remainder of her life, donning black for the next 40 years. She also gave orders that Albert's rooms be kept precisely as he had left them, and gave orders to her maids to set out new clothes for her husband each day, along with changing the water in his wash basin. Despite having 9, she didn't like kids. Sincerely speaking, after having given birth to 9 children in less than 17 years, you probably wouldn't be gushing about the joys of pregnancy and motherhood. When Victoria gave birth to her first child, Vicky, she was astounded by the wonder of birth and said to her ladies-in-waiting, "Having a kid feels like the stuff of dreams." She was alert and sweet, and I must admit that I was really proud of her. But, as the years went by, she developed a different perspective on infants and kids. The Queen told her daughter when Vicky, who had just been married, expressed her excitement at the prospect of becoming a mother. "What you say about the pride of giving birth to an everlasting soul is really nice, sweetheart, but I admit I cannot enter into it. At such times, I think much more of our being like a cow or a dog, when our weak nature becomes so very animal and unecstatic." The lottery of marriage and having children also outraged her, and she said, "Every marriage is such a lottery. The happiness is always an exchange, though it may be a very joyful one. Nevertheless, the poor woman is bodily and morally the husband's slave." That usually makes my throat tight. When I consider a young girl who is jovial, content, and unencumbered, I am struck by the sickly, hurting state to which a young bride is typically condemned, which is undeniably the price of marriage. She owned countless dolls. Victoria spent a lot of her time playing with her dolls because she wasn't permitted to interact with other kids. Given that 132 of them have been saved and that the Queen played with dolls until she was 14 years old, she must have owned hundreds of dolls. The dolls themselves were basic, but Victoria dressed them in handmade, finely detailed outfits. High-end silk, pricey lace, and even tiny gems were used to create the dolls' ensembles. The young princess used to dress up the dolls as members of the court. One doll was created to resemble Queen Elizabeth I, figures from plays and operas, and ballet dancers.